He was saying Mazel Tov for the release of two hostages, Cain, Yerbu. We should be able to share such amazing news more and more and more, and they should all come home immediately. We want to learn today in the schos of Miriam Liba Bas Chana for a refuah shalema ukreva for her. I also want to mention that our classmate Sarah Weinstein has a new anicle, a new grandson, born to her son and daughter-in-law, Avi and Chaya Mushka Weinstein. Baby boy, the baby's name is Yosef, and all the families should have tremendous nachas from little Yosef, and we should only be able to share simchas. Today's sikha is Teruma Gimel in Chelek Chaf Aleph, I believe. And it's a little bit of a different kind of sikha, and I think we're all going to really enjoy it tremendously. Aleph, Be'inyan Sir Geviyeh HaMenorah, regarding how the goblets, the decorative goblets on the menorah were fashioned. Amru Chazal, our sages taught, Lamahin Doimin, to what can they be compared? Kamin Kaises Alexandrium. They appeared to look like the cups of Alexandria. Uperish Harambam, Ubeperish Mishnah Shalai, and the Rambam elucidates this in his parish on Mishnayos. Dahainu, that this means, Kais Sheshulayim Shalai Tsarim. It means that the bottom, the base, is narrow. V'chein pasuk Rambam lahalacha b'sefer hayad, and in like fashion, the Rambam basically adjudicates that this is the way it looked in his Sefer Hayad. Hagavim doimin l'kaisis Alexandria, that these decorative goblets on the menorah looked like cups that they either made or used or both in Alexandria. Shafihan Rachav, the opening or the top of the cup is wide, Vishuleihen Katzar, and the base is narrow. And concerning this, there's something that makes us stop and wonder. Yeshna lifanenu tzir hamenorah shetzir harambam beguf ksav yad kachay bepirish hamishnayis shaloi. We have in our possession, we have before us a drawing that the Rambam made himself with his holy hand, and he included this drawing in his Perish HaMishnayos. And if you look at the Sikha, if you downloaded it or you want to scroll, you could see that they have included the drawing of the Rambam at the end of the Sikha, so we can all kind of look at it and see what it looks like. And the Rebbe writes that it's kind of interesting, anomalous, different. The Sham tzir hagvim hu ba'ifan hafuch chelkai harachav shel hagvia pien poiner letzida tachta shel hamenorah. That behold, you would think goblets would be facing with their wider top upwards, but if you look at how the menorah was drawn by the Rambam, it's upside down. The wider part is facing downward. The chelkai hatzar shulehen, and the base, the more narrow part, lamaila, is facing upward. Hainu, tzir shel kai shel Alexandria hafucha. It's an Alexandrian cup, or a cup fashioned in the style of Alexandria, upside down. And although the Rambam himself, it tells us that in drawing this rendition of the menorah, he's only coming to give us the most general idea. He's just telling us how many of these decorative goblets there were and where they were located on the menorah itself. But he tells us that he's not coming to draw such a precise drawing that you'll know all the details of the decorative goblet and so on and so forth. And for this reason, for instance, the cups appear in triangular form, even though an Alexandrian cup or a cup fashioned in the style of Alexandria was not triangular. And the Rebbe says, it's logical to understand that a cup would not be fashioned in triangular fashion, because nobody would ever make the base of a cup pointy. Because then you can't put the cup down on the table. You need to have a flat base of the cup in order for it to serve pragmatically. Ella shehim tzorim. So what are we supposed to learn from this? Not that it was actually pointy, but that the base was narrow. Ubifrat biyachas l'roichev pihen. And especially when you're comparing and contrasting it to the width of the opening, the top of the cup. Aval ein ze tam litzayram behifoch kisheshuleim l'maylo fihen l'mata. This is all good and fine. Okay, so we understand it's not 100% with all the details, but this would not be a reason to draw it upside down. Ubefrat sharambam hayadaikon b'chol inin u'b'chol prat, and especially the Rebbe says because the Rambam was taught very specifically. He was very punctilious in every concept, in every detail. Ve'ein lahalois aladas shashav v'tzier sakviyim ba'ofen hafuch b'chol gevia chaf beis pa'amim. It's inconceivable to think that he sat down to draw this drawing, which he prefaces that it's not exact in all of its specifications, but still, he does make 22 of these decorative goblets in a very specific way, and he draws them upside down. It's not conceivable that this is a mistake, or that there's nothing to learn from here. Bays. So it seems plausible, it seems very logical to say, Rambam tzir sagvim ba'ofen zeh, ki ledatei chen haya ofen kfiyasam. It is logical and plausible to conclude that the Rambam drew them with the cups upside down, seemingly, because that is how it was on the menorah. Either he received this information as it was passed down from generation to generation, or perhaps he had in his possession midrashim that are not extant today, that somehow were lost. And the Rebbe says that we find that in a couple of places, the Rambam and other Rishonim refer to sources in the Midrash that we don't have today, that we don't have access to. Okay, so obviously the Rambam has it from somewhere. Either it was transmitted orally, or he had a text that we no longer had. Then you might ask, why didn't he bring it in his Sefer Yad in the Mishnah Torah? V'lo hevi zayis b'Sefer Yad, k'shem shalei hevi b'Sefer Zatziyurim shebeperish Mishnayos shalei. The Rebbe says that this is not anomalous, because in general, in the Yad, he doesn't bring down the other drawings that he does include in his parish on the Mishnayos. And he doesn't do this as a matter of course, although missing from the Yad HaChazaka that way, missing from the Mishnah Torah, will be certain details that we can only see in the drawings. But for whatever reason, he didn't include it. However, if you look at footnote 11 with the asterisk, it says there, Ha'ar la'achar zman, shuv nisparsim kisvei yad, the Sefer Hayad, that now, and it doesn't say when this was added, but it says that of late, obviously of late, a few decades ago, not of late this month, were publicized handwritten manuscripts of the Yad Bisham behilchas beis habchira perek gimel sif hey isa v'zuhi tzurasa, and the Rambam says, and this is what it looked like, and this is a drawing. V'yesh tzira hamenayah k'moy beperish hamishnayos, and in that manuscript of the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam does have an illustration of the menorah, just as it appears in his Perish Ala Mishnayos. V'gam sham hagaviyim mitzuyarim pihem lamata v'shuleim lamayla, and there too the decorative goblets are drawn in such a way where where their mouth, meaning the part that you would drink from, if you were going to drink from this, are facing downwards, and the base upon which the cup would presumably rest is facing upwards. Kitzir hamenorah shebeguf kisvei yad kodesh harambam. The Chain, and the Rebbe says, and also in that illustration, hakanim oilim ba'alachsein, that the sides of the menorah, the kanim, the help me somebody, the branches of the menorah are on a diagonal, and we're going to get to that soon. Okay. V'yesh leimar kama taimim b'zeh. And this is the last paragraph in Seif Beis. The Rebbe says we might offer a number of reasons for why this is so. Umehem. Number one, possibly Aleph, milichatchila leyahayu tziyurim b'tachnis sifrei Mishnah Torah. From the beginning, the Rambam never planned to put illustrations in the Mishnah Torah. That could be one reason. Beis Yadua, at kama mima'et harambam b'tachlis lahavi b'sifrei dvarim she'enam mifurashim b'shas u'kiyetz b'zeh. Another possible reason for why the Rambam did not include illustrations in the Mishnah Torah is because, in general, the Rambam mitigated the instances in which he brought down something that is not written very explicitly in the Gemara or another source like that. Gimel, and a third possible reason we might offer is Kama me'apratim ha'elu l'datim einam li'ikuva klal. And it could be that a third reason is because these details that would be shown in the illustrations do not prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah. So in other words, maybe you could take away from this that the Rambam was a minimalist, and in a number of ways. So he didn't clutter the Mishnah Torah with illustrations. He didn't include details that were not written explicitly in the Gemara and other such sources. And he didn't include possibly details that were not absolutely necessary to the fulfillment of the mitzvah. The Rebbe says there's a lot more to speak about this, but it's beyond the purview of this discussion. This is not the place to go into a full-blown analysis of why the Rambam did not include drawings in the Mishnah Torah. Gimel. Hanal miyashev mevaris harambam. Okay, so now if Beis explains why it's not found explicitly in the Mishnah Torah. Aval ha'she'ela b'mkoymai medus. But our question still remains, which is, Halamai hayu gvia hamenorah hafuchim shapiyim lamata. Why would these decorative goblets have been fashioned in such a way that's kind of counterintuitive, contrary to what a normal cup or goblet looks like, with the base on the top and the opening of the cup facing downwards? Ubefrat, the Rebbe says, and especially this is a question, Shematzinu Shakarshi Mishkan Hayutzrichim Liyos Oimdim Derek Dilasan. This is, after all, Parshas Teruma. We learn about the building of the Mishkan, and one of the things we learn is that the walls of the Mishkan, the krushim, the planks that were made out of wood, had to be used in such a way that it stood in a way that reflected the way in which the tree from which it was taken grew from the ground. Oimdim derek dilason. They were stood up. They were used in the way that they grow. Dafka. Hatachton lamata ve'elyon lamayla. So what was from the bottom part of the tree was on the bottom of the plank, what was from the top of the tree was higher. And from this we learn Gemara Sukkah, klal, a rule, an axiom, shekola mitzvahs kulan ein adam yotze behen ela derech dilasan, that when you're dealing with mitzvahs that necessitate things that grow, they need to be used in the way that they grow. So we know that you have to hold the esrog in a certain way. You can't hold the lulav backwards. Upside down. You can't hold hadasim and aravas upside down. Imkain. So if we have this idea that generally speaking, things should be used in the way that they grow, which the Rebbe is expanding here to mean in the plausible way of their usage or the intuitive way, imkain lama yuagvim hefach derech dilasan. So why would these decorative goblets have been placed on the menorah in a way that is opposite of derech dilasan, the intuitive way? V'yesh leimar, and we might say shahadavar yuvan al pimash matinu b'nagea leklolos inyan menorah inyan me'ein v'dugmas hanal. And the Rebbe says that the answer can be found. Of course, this is the Rebbe's Chiddush, which he always prefaces with Yesh Loimar, one might say. Okay, so the Rebbe says that this can be understood by referencing a more kind of global thing regarding the menorah, because this, of course, is a detail in how the menorah was fashioned. But what do we know about the menorah in general? Regarding the light that emanated from the menorah, we learn in Gemara Menachos, Loila Eir Ani Tzarech. David says, I don't need illumination. I don't need a lamp. The reason for the menorah and the luminescence of the menorah is to testify to all the citizens of the world that Hashem's presence rests with Bnei Yisrael. V'hainu, this means she'ara menorah loiba kadei lahayeres makam amidasa hamishka v'amikdash. The purpose of the menorah was not to illuminate the area. Adarabah, on the contrary, sham einay tzarech l'oira. There's no need for it. There was so much luminescence. It was actually for the rest of the world to understand that Hashem's presence rests with Bnei Yisrael. And for this very reason, nasu chalonos beis hamikdash ba'ofen hafchi mechalonos stam. And for this reason, the windows of the mikdash were fashioned in the opposite way of how windows are normally fashioned. Okay, not the windows of today, but the windows of yore served to bring light, presumably, into the structure. And the walls were much, much thicker. And the windows were fashioned shkufim atumim, meaning on one side they were more open, on one side they were more closed. What does this mean? Shkufim mibachutz. They were open on the outside, they were broader on the outside, va'atumim b'ifnim, meaning, the Rebbe says in parentheses, rechavim mibachutz, broader on the outside, v'tzarim b'ifnim. And the Mefarshim explain why windows were normally fashioned that way. Because when you put an aperture, you put a window into a wall, you build it in such a way. Okay, I'm sorry. So what we were describing, I'm sorry, I should have explained that what we described in the last paragraph was the specific way in which it was built in the Beis Hamikdash, which is opposite of what is normally done. What was in the Beis Hamikdash? It was wide on the outside and it was very narrow on the inside the window. But normal, now going to the next paragraph, but normal windows built in those days was the opposite way. The opening, the window was wider within, from outside. Why? Because because what you wanted to do was you wanted the light to be able to irradiate every corner and every side of the inside area. So you wanted to facilitate the light spreading out. Aval chalenis beis hamikdash hayu lehefach, kotzem mibifnim, but it was the opposite in the Beis Hamikdash. The window were narrow inside, umarchiv hahelech litzad chutz, but then as it went towards the outside, it became wider and wider, kidei shetehei oire yoytze mehechel shetoir la'olam, so that the light from inside the Beis Hamikdash could irradiate the world. Ki tafkida shel or hamenorah hu edus hu l'chol boy olam, because the menorah was to broadcast a message to the world. So you wanted to facilitate the light spreading out and irradiating to the widest possible girth outside. Dalet, and here comes this huge chidush, and the Rebbe says, and now that we understand something more kind of overarching about the menorah, we're in a position to understand the peculiar way in which these decorative goblets were fashioned on the menorah. Rabbeinu Bechaya Mevayer, the Rabbeinu Bechaya explains as haremer shebegviye hamenorah, what is alluded to in these goblets of the menorah. So Rabbeinu Bechaya says, Gviya hu kli sheyesh le beis kibul v'hu mashke umarve. A cup is a receptacle meant to hydrate or irrigate and nourish those that use it. Vizehu, and the Rebbeinu Bechaya says, Vizehu remez al galgalim shehi mekablim koiches helyonim umashpiyim koich ba'olam hashafel. And this alludes to the galgalim, I'm going to go there in a moment, that receive energy and effluence from above and convey it downwards into this lower world. Now, I don't know any science. I don't know what galgalim means. So in the English translation that the project provides, it says spheres. That was not terribly helpful to me, I must admit. I did not understand. I listened to some Magidei Shiurim, Magidei Shir, who used different words like orbit, or galgalim, neither of which was especially helpful. So I'm going to read to you from the Rambam, is Mishnah Torah Perek Shlishi, and I submit that I do not understand what I'm reading, but it's the best I could do. The spheres, the Rambam says in Halacha Aleph Perek Gimel Mishnah Torah, are called the heavens, the firmament, the habitation, the skies. There are 9 spheres. The closest sphere is the sphere of the moon. The second sphere, which is above it, is the sphere which contains the planet Kochav. The third sphere, which is above it, contains the planet Noga, and so on and so forth. And it sounds like a maybe Galgalim could mean galaxy, but then again, that's like a big maybe because I know nothing about astronomy, but if anybody does, please, please, please help us here. But really the main thing we have to know is that whatever it is that's being referred to is something that acts as a conduit for conveying what is above downward. The hadgasha bazehi, and so what's being underscored here is hahashpa mea elyon el hashafel, mashke umarve. The important aspect of this is the hashpa'ah, the conveyance from above downward to the lowly, that it irrigates and hydrates and nourishes. V'hainu, what does this all mean to us? She'ikar tafkida shel kais ein aliyas kli kibul. The main aspect or characteristic of a cup is not that it is a receptacle. No, Zehu tafkita shel chavis, yayin. That would be something like a barrel. A barrel is a place to store water, wine, etc. Kais hu klish al yadai magiyim hamayim min hachavis oy hamayon ukiyetze bezeh el ha'adam. So different from a barrel or some other receptacle in which you store things, the cup is by definition a construct of conveyance, of hashpa, of giving forth. V'hu mashkil marves ha'adam hashaiseh. It hydrates and nourishes the person who's drinking thereof. The nimtza, the Rebbe says, and so from this we understand shahabir hanal Rabbeinu B'chaya oile bekana echad im maimer azal hanal al derech klolos inin hamenayah. That this explanation of Rabbeinu B'chaya aligns, correlates with what we said earlier. The Chazal taught about the menorah. Loi la'ira nitzarech. Just like a cup is not in the main about storage, the menorah is not in the main about irradiating light into the area where it is found. But rather, the whole point of the menorah is to testify to the world that Hashem rests with the Jews. It's not about being the receptacle, the receiver. It's not Hashem says, I need light in the mikdash. It's laha'ir es ha'olam shebibachutz. It's all about irradiating the outside. U'b'lashon habachaya lahashpia ba'olam hashafel. It's to be mashpia. It's to convey to the lowly world. And look at footnote 23, just even the first two lines. And the Rakanti, another Mefarish explains that a kais is heim mekablim lihashpia, v'loy mekablim umashpiim. It's not that a cup receives and also conveys. It's that a cup receives in order to convey. That is the purpose of a cup, not for storage. Hey, al pizayuvan hatam shagvim shabeminayer hayu ba'ofen shapian lamata vishulein lamaila. And now, based on this, we can understand the reason for why the decorative goblets on the menorah were positioned or fashioned in such a way where they look backwards to us, where the opening is pointing downwards and the base is up. Kishagvim mishamshim ba'ofen zmani l'shem kibul. Because when you're using a cup temporarily for the purpose of being a receptacle, for instance, when you're holding the cup, let's say to say Kiddush, matzavan hu shapian l'mayla v'shulein l'mata. So then, yes, it's going to be faced in such a way that the base is downward and the opening is upward. And during that temporary time, it serves as a receptacle for the beverage. But the decorative goblets were not fashioned for pragmatic use. They were fashioned for decoration, but the Rebbe is teaching us they were fashioned to teach us something very specific. The way in which they were fashioned teaches us that it's all about mashke or marve. It's all about what you're doing for somebody else. It's all about the way in which the cup is in service of somebody else. So when you look at it from this perspective, it's not contrary. Think about when you're drinking from a cup. The mouth of the cup is downward and the base is upward. You have to turn over the cup in order that the beverage should be able to be poured from it. And so it is in what we're looking at now. Shalamata min hamikdash beruchnias, oibeloshen habechaya nal mashpiyim ba'ilam hashafel, because the whole idea of the light of the menorah was to illuminate and irradiate all the citizens of the world who are lower spiritually than the mikdash, or using the terminology of Benu B'chaya, that just like the galgalim, the spheres, convey to this lowly world, al kain matzav hagavim shebemenorah hu pm lamata v'shuleim lamayla. Al derech halonis hamikdash sheim shkufim atumim lehefach mechalonis habayis. This is all the same thing, that because the menorah itself is not for the purpose of serving as a lamp for that place, but irradiating the whole world, which is reflected in the fact that the windows of the mikdash were the opposite of normal windows. Normal windows would be wider on the inside and narrower on the outside, but here they were narrow on the inside and wider on the outside because the light of the mikdash was irradiating the outside, contrary to the normal usage of windows, which is to bring the sun into the building, into the house. And now in Vav, something really spectacular. Al pi hanal, based on the above, yesh levar b'avodas ha'adam, es haremez b'halimud mizeh shehagavim hayu pian rachav v'shulein katzar dafka. And we need to take a lesson from this into our avodas Hashem. Something specific, that the bottom is narrow, the base is narrow, but the top from which the beverage will be poured, as it were, is wide. Move on, once we understand that these decorative goblets allude to the idea of nourishing and irrigating and hydrating others, we understand that for this, you need a wide opening. When it comes to interfacing with another person, or more generally engaging with our avodah of making a dir le'yizbarach b'tachteidim, which is really the avodah of Eidus hu l'chol b'ay olam. This is what the menorah was all about, irradiating the whole world and informing all the citizens of the world. Tzarich hadavar lehei asais mitach rachvos hachi gedola. So the way in which we convey this effluence, the way in which we pour out this beverage, has to be with width and broadness and largesse. Ad l'mayla mimitita v'hagbala, beyond any limitations. V'lachein tzarech adam lekabel ulahachnis el toichei es hakoiches hagdolim b'yoser piv shedarka mikabel l'toichei rachav. And that's why a person has to bring into themselves all of these great keiches. And the mouth of the cup, the top of the cup, is where you take in all of this width, all of this greatness, all of these important resources. V'hine, kasher hanidon hu biyachas la'atzmai b'yoseh b'tchilas ha'avodah mamash, ayafilu la'achar mikein. When we're talking about being at relatively the beginning of this avodah, or maybe even a little bit after that, elo sheme'ezeh sivashatia avodasa hu mugbeles, azay matzavayhu piv lamayla. So when you're at the beginning of the avodah, then the cup is in its traditional or conventional position with the opening on top. But when it comes to giving to someone else, in other words, kol zman, you working on being makabel, then you need to have the wide opening on top because you need to be makabel. You're bringing all the stuff in. You need to facilitate that. But when it comes to being mashpia on the zulas, working with someone else, and specifically in our avodah of making a dir lo yisbarach, The hechrich ladas, we have to know, shebezeh choyvehi liyos lamayla mehagbalas. She'az nasa harachav klape hamekabel mimenu hamata. Then we have to know that we have to transcend all limitations. Then, when you're pointing towards somebody else, when you're being mashpia, it has to be klape hamekabel. The wide part has to be downward. Valderach mashin is bar b'makam achar barucha be'inin hachiluk shebein trumas ha'adonim u'trumas hashkolim u'trumas hamishkan, and this is connected to what has been explained elsewhere at great length. And the footnote you could see that is Chelek Yud Aleph of Likutei Sichos, the difference between the donation that had to be made for the adonim and the I shouldn't say donation, the offering that was made for the adonim, the basis of the of the Mishkan, of that the Krushim sat in, and the offering for the Shkolim. And there's a difference between that and Trumas HaMishkan, the offerings that were made for the more general building of the Mishkan. Trumas HaAdonim v'Hashkolim ha'isa mugbeles l'davar misuyam. Because the first two offerings, the one for the Adonim and the one that everybody had to give a half shekel, it was very circumscribed. It was set aside for something very specific. In the first case, it was kesef, and the second, it was machatzis hashekel. Masha came, but a contradistinction, the trumas hamishkan ha'isa mikol sugi habriya. But the offerings that were brought for the general purpose of building the Mishkan comprised every aspect and every strata of creation. It came from doimim, from the inanimate. It came from tameach, from the vegetative. It came from the chai, from the living, from the animals, right? The different heights. Ubetzirov ish yidvenu libay, and it came, of course, through the agency of man, and that is the fourth category of the world, the medaber. Ki trumas ha'adanim v'hashkolim remezes al hanochas ha'adanim v'haskalas avedasa shel Yehudi, because the offering that was given for the bases of the krushim, the silver bases, and the shkolim, they allude to the basis of all of avodah of every Jew. Asher avodas timidim hi kesidram, avodah misuderes, heichal ba'amir moida'ani, v'achar kach halicha midarga aleph, l'sheni v'chulei. This alludes to basics of every Yid's avodah, and it's in an order, and there's a certain given trajectory. First you say Maida'ani, then you go to the second thing. Masha ein kein trumas hamishkan remezes lechlalas ha'avodah l'asas le'mikdash. But when you're talking about the offerings to the Mishkan, this alludes to the more general avodah of making the mikdash, or in our lives, making the dir la'yizbarach, v'shachanti b'seichem, dir b'tachtainim, u'ba'avodah zu ein kol hagbalos, v'hi makifa es kol inyon ha'olam. And when it comes to that, there's two differences. Number one, there's no limitation. And number two, it's all encompassing. It's not just one kind of offering that was given by every Jew in exactly the same uniform amount. So there's multiplicity, there's there's variety, and there's an all-encompassing energy to it. Zayin. V'zeu haremez b'nyonenu, da'af al pi shekol ha'mitzvah tzarich la'sos en derech dilasan dafka. And this is alluded to in what we're discussing, that although, generally speaking, mitzvahs should be done in such a way that what you're using is pointing derech dilasan, the way it grows, dafka, kimuva legabe lulav u'minav, like the Gemara teaches when it comes to the lulav and the esther that does in the ravais, umisham nilmad l'shar mitzvahs, and from this we learn for other mitzvahs, afal pikein hagavim shebeminayra him hefech derech dilasan. But when it comes to being mashpia, there's room for variety. There's room for shaking it up, for discarding orthodoxy, for shifting paradigms. Kol ha-mitzvahs ubefrat lulav u'minav Hein bedumas kol seder stalshlos. Umemela tzarech hadavar liyos bechlalos beseder ubehstalshlos derech dilasa. Because mitzvahs, and specifically the mitzvah of the Daled Minim, is in an organized fashion, like Seder Hishtalshalos. It devolves in a certain order. And it has to be in that order, otherwise it doesn't work, it doesn't devolve properly. It has to be derech dilasan, quote unquote. V'lachein Seder Hakim Shel HaMitzvah Hu Ba'ivin Shel derech dilasan. And that's why you do the mitzvah in that way. V'af ha'kaviyim atzmam shuleim katzofiyim rachav. But the Gaviyim themselves, that had the very narrow base and the wide mouth, but when they become part of the menorah, they are actually fashioned out of the same piece of gold that the whole menorah is fashioned of. It's of one piece. So just like the menorah in general was all about the inyan of hashpa'ah, it wasn't for the purpose of irradiating that space. It was for the purpose of lahashkes laharvais, to irrigate, to hydrate, to nourish, and to do that to the more lowly, laha'ir mi bachutz, to radiate the outside. Harei avodah zu dereshes me'adam shinui b'tivoi v'riglasai. And this necessitates on the part of the person who wants to be mashpia to change their nature, to change their habits. Sometimes we got to do things that are out of our comfort zone. It's not what we would be drawn to. It's not what we normally do. It's not our MO. It's not. For all of latzeis me'atzmai, we have to get out of our heads. We have to get out of our boxes. Umemela chalaynais beisahim ba'efen deshkufim atumim. V'hagaviyim piyem lamata v'shuleim lamayla hefach derek dilasan. So everything about this was inverted. The windows were narrow in the inside, but wide on the outside, because the light was supposed to go out. The cups, the decorative goblets, were pointing downwards, because they were not in service of the self, as it were. They're in the service of others. And the Rebbe reminds us once again, underscoring that when it comes to being mashpia, don't hold back. It should be l'mayla medida v'hagbala. This is making me feel a tiny, tiny, tiny bit better about the times I didn't let my young children have snacks that were put aside for some kind of important program. I've grown out of that, I'm happy to report. I know this is not supposed to be a support group for me, but I don't know, this made me feel a little bit better, maybe, I don't know, that for others it has to be like, but maybe that includes our children, of course. Yeah, that's what my more mature seichel is telling me. I don't know. Okay, it's almost like the sikha is in two parts. That was the first part. Now we go into the second part. And this is something that we're all familiar with, organically from the laboratory of life, but it is so special to be able to learn from the inside. B'tzir hamenorah shebeguf ksav yad harambam, yeshna oid prat hashonim min hatziurim haragilim shel hamenorah. When you look at the drawing of the Rambam, made from his ksav yad kachay, there's another detail that is different in his rendering from the way the menorah has been conventionally drawn. Sheishes kane ha-menorah nimshacha mehakona emtsoi litzad maila bekav yasher ba'alachsein. The branches of the menorah, the 6 branches of the menorah that come out of the middle branch, the 7th, and go upward, come out on a diagonal. And not like in all the other drawings where we have the rounded drawing, the half rainbow. And even though possibly different from the goblets, which the Rambam painstakingly drew 22 of them. So it's hard to argue that he was just trying to be very kind of general. Maybe you could say about this that this is just like a simplified version. And that's why he made it diagonal rather than round, because making it round would have necessitated more effort, let's say. But the Rebbe says, he named Meforish B'Perish Reb Avram ben Rambam, but we have in the writings of the Rambam's son, Reb Avram, he describes Sheishes Konim, Nimshachim Migufa Shel Menorah, Letzad Reisha, that the 6 branches that came out of the menorah go upwards, B'Yosher, straight, not rounded. And he says, K'moshe tzir Isa Abba Moirizal, Loi Be'igel K'moshe tzir Isa Zulasa. And he says, just exactly as my father drew them, and not rounded like others, like everybody else did. V'chein isa gam b'perish Rashi ala Torah, and Rashi in our parsha says, shesheshes hakanim ba'alachsei nimshachim va'elin, that the branches of the menorah go out on a diagonal. V'nimsa shetiyuri hamenorah haragilim einam loy kedas Rashi v'loy k'moshe tiyar Rambam. So that means that the conventional drawings that proliferate of the menorah are not in sync with the way Rashi understands it and not with the drawing of the Rambam. Tess. Vihine bal mishnas chasidim besifre ma'aseh cheshev, and there is a sefer called Ma'aseh Cheshev, which is Al Meleches HaMishkan, describes everything in the Mishkan. Kasav b'pashtos shesheshes hakanim nimshachim beigel, and in that sefer, the author writes, like casually, he writes that the branches of the menorah are rounded. Because of Levard, Aval Pishem Perish Rashi Muchach Shalai Haya Beigel, and he writes and he explains that even though Rashi says they were not rounded, Aval HaRambam Bechibure Lo Hiskir Tevas Halachsin Ela Kasav Nimshachim Va'olim. But the author of this sefer writes that the Rambam did not write specifically the word alachson diagonal elakasa, but he wrote v'nimshachim va'olim. They go up, they protrude, they continue, they extend, and they go up. The Havi is different. Baal chachmas hamishkan shemizen nira shayu olim akanim kemat beigol. And from this, he infers, he extrapolates that the branches went out in a rounded fashion. And this seems plausible because in this way they are similar again to the spheres in heaven. Shekenegdam heim hashva hashiva neris, and the 7 branches parallel the 7 galgalim.
So I asked my husband while we were learning, so I didn't get a full picture, but he said something that there's like the galgalim are like a rotation, but it takes the thing with it. So there's like individuals concentric like semicircles while they're going around, and then circles all around, but it takes the thing with it as it goes. I don't know if that clarifies anything.
I mean, so from what I was able to gather, the reason why they ultimately settled on the word sphere is because what you described is an orbit. And I think there isn't a lot of clarity on exactly what this means. I don't know.
But it's saying because of that word, therefore, it was extrapolated that the menorah was rounded from that opinion. Is that what it's saying?
It seems that it's saying that what the Rabbeinu Bechaya was saying, and maybe others, that the 7, even though the Rebbe didn't bring down this in Rabbeinu Bechaya, but that there's a correlation, or there seems to be a parallel being made between the planetary influences and the influence of the light of the menorah. They're both for the purpose of being mashpia to something lower. Now, this author went as far as saying that the 7 kanim of the menorah parallel the 7, whatever it is, on above. Whether they're orbits, galaxies, spheres, I don't know. Aval, Lafia Nias Daiti, but the Rebbe says, according to my humble opinion, who mistimas lashon harambam. But in my opinion, the Rebbe says, in my humble opinion, the Maisa Choshev is writing that he bases his understanding that the branches were rounded from the obliqueness of the Rambam's verbiage, of something that's missing from the Rambam. That loy hiskir tevas alaksin, that the Rambam doesn't specifically use the word alaksin, which is diagonal. The Rebbe quotes, and he's saying, so based on this, he understands that it must have been round if the Rambam didn't write that they were diagonal, and this seems plausible. But the Rebbe says, but once this came to our attention, it was revealed, the actual drawing that the Rambam made about the menorah, they do so shall ben Rambam, and then on top of that, you have his son saying that that's the way it was. Ubahadgasha shemasha aviv tzir b'yosher, and he doesn't use the Avram ben Rambam doesn't use the word alaksim, but he says b'yosher, they're straight. Who b'kavana mifareshes dafka kach v'loy be'igel. So he's saying that it's dafka straight, it's dafka diagonal, and it's not rounded. And therefore, batal hayisoidu batal abinya. So since the author of the Maisa Choshev, his thesis is based on something that's missing from the Rambam's words. But once we became, once we had the Rambam's drawing, and we have what the Rambam's son testifies about this, so batal hisod batal abinyan. It's like the whole thesis falls apart. It all crumbles. Ubemchilas k'vay terasai, ulafia nias daiti, and with all the respect that I give to the Maisa Choshev's Torah, and in my humble opinion, Nira Bara, the Rebbe says it seems very clear. If they would have seen this illustration, and they would have seen what the son of the Rambam wrote, there would be no 2 different opinions. Everybody would agree. Al derech mashakos Rabbeinu Azakim b'Shulchan Aruch Shaloi, the Alter Rebbe similarly comments, Asher harbe misfarim harishonim zal lo yatzu la'ar hatfus adayim b'mei ha'achronim. There were a lot of writings from the Rishonim that were not accessible in print to the Achronim. Olazois vaday ein l'smaich, and therefore you can't necessarily rely on that. So you can't build an opinion on something that has been repudiated by information that came to light afterwards. And now that the drawing is extant, and now that we have the writings of Rebbe Avram ben Harambam, Yud, Ve'im kenim advarim, and if these words are true, mehanochin lahachazir atara liyoshna. And the Rebbe says it's only right that we should restore the former glory, meaning we should restore the former correct shape of the menorah. Shekola oisim tziurim shel hamenorah l'sayeh b'limud mara hamenorah shel mishkan hamikdash, that all those who prepare materials that are meant to aid in the learning of what the menorah looked like, that was in the Mishkan and the Mikdash, yitzayru eskane hamenorah balachsin. This should be drawn properly. It should be drawn with the branches of the menorah on a diagonal. Kedas Rashi, which is Pshuta Shel Mikra, Vaha Rambam. And really, in the final analysis, there's no argument here. And in all schools, on the stencils and the handouts that are being given to students, with the rendering of the menorah, that has to be phased out to give children and students of any age renderings of the menorah that are round. The whole point of these drawings is to remind us of what the menorah looked like in the Mishkan and the Mikdash. Kidai ubiyaser sheyishanu es hatzir v'yitzayu es hakana balachsoin. It is more than proper. It is more than kidai, fitting that the drawings, the illustrations should be changed to reflect this truth that the kanim were ba'alaksin, that the branches were diagonal. Yud Aleph, v'oid inyan b'zeh. And there's another reason for why this should be done. Hatzir harogel shel hamenorah, shesheshes hakanim hin kechatzoyish keshes. The conventional rendering of the menorah, where the branches are round, hu al pi hashara chikui shel mitzuyer hamenorah asher einam Yehudim sayru beroimi v'al shar hanitzachon shel Titus yimach shemai. When and how did that curved, rounded rendition of the menorah gain popularity? It's based on a copy of the etching of the menorah that was produced by Romans, non-Jews, on Titus's arch, the arch of victory of a Russia, Yimach Shemai. Kishatitos, or Titus, Harasha, Hechariv is Beis HaMikdash. When he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, Tziva Lakachas es Klei HaMikdash Ulaviyim L'Romi, he gave instructions for the Kalim of the Mikdash to be brought to Rome. And for the glory and the honor of this Russia was constructed the Arch of Titus, the Victory Arch, Hanoise Eshemai, that is called on his name, Shar Titus. Al Shar Zeh, Sieru es Nesias Klei HaMikdash HaShvuyim, and on this arch were drawn or etched the way they were carrying away these holy vessels of the Mikdash that were now taken into captivity, and among them the menorah. Ubetzir hamenorah al shar titus sheishes hakanim him kechatzai keshes. And in that rendering, the branches of the menorah are in half rainbows. They're rounded. So on top of the fact, as elucidated above, that this is not reflective of the fact, but what was the purpose of this etching? It was all to underscore and to showcase and to express the way in which Rome became sovereign over the Jews, Rahman al-Islam, how we became subservient to Rome. Judea Capta is inscribed on that arch of Titus, which means that the Jews were captured. Yehuda Am Yisrael Hashavoi were taken into captivity. V'hayu zmanim shebehem hayu machrichim Yehudim lavoy el hashar v'lerois es haroshum v'hamitzuyin sham kedei lahashpilim v'chulei v'chulei. And there were times where Jews were forced to come and tour that arch of Titus and to take in and to see how their status is depicted and described. So that whole arch is for the purpose of deprecating the Jew. So we should take the rendering of the menorah that was as depicted by these Rishaim and use this in our schools and in our shuls and in our lives. V'nimtza shetzir kanei hamenoy chatzoi keshes kefi shemitziyorum al shar titos, that this rendition tzarich la'orer za'akas shever, that depiction should actually cause us to emit broken cries. On top of the main thing, that it is not accurate. It does not depict reality as we have it in our Messiah from Rashi and the Rambam. But it's also us validating something that these Rishaim drew. And the whole purpose of that arch was to put down Jews, to aggravate Jews. So why would we embrace that image? Instead of remembering that menorah is all about reminding us that we are a light to the nation, what was the reason for the menorah in the Mishkan and the Mikdash? It was served to testify that the Jews were the ones upon whom Hashem rests Shechina. We ratify and validate a rendition of the menorah that really is broadcasting the opposite, as Nitzachon Raimi al Yehudim Rachmana litzlan, the victory of Rome over the Jews. So it doesn't make sense on multiple levels to showcase the menorah in that way. Should be the will of Hashem that very, very soon the true and the complete Geula should come. We should have the actual menorah in completion. And this will not be academic, and we won't have to discuss this. We will all see the shape of the menorah. And Moshe and Aaron will return, and we will see with our fleshy eyes, like we say, we will see with our eyes as kiyum hatzivui daber al aron b'haloischas haneras hadlokas hamenorah. We will all watch the lighting of this menorah in the Beis Hamikdash kipshuta mamash ubamhera v'yameinu mamash, and in a very simple, earthy, concrete way, and it should be very, very, very soon, mamash, like today would be perfect, like now. And again, we're learning for the Refuah Shlema Ukreva of Miriam Liba Bas Chana, and for the return of all of the hostages, completely complete in body, in soul, in spirit, in Mitzvah Hashem. And all the soldiers should have only nitzachon and only good health, and should be shalom.
Hi, Rivky, thank you so much. I want to ask you a question. The recording could go off, but whatever. So, Rivky?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening. Hi,
Hi everybody. Why was there a necessity b'chlal to have a menorah? Wouldn't it have been a bigger Kiddush Hashem, a bigger demonstration that there was no light necessary for the Beis Hamikdash? We were to give light. In other words, just don't have a menorah, or like don't even have windows and there's light inside the Beis Hamikdash. That would have been really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think zooming out, it's a much bigger question. Why have a building? You could have, like, I don't know, some kind of clouds hovering or some kind of a celestial display of something, and that would be like the house of God. So, like, I think on the most basic level, it's all this idea of dir lo yisbarach b'tachtonim, that it has to be made of the tachtonim, it has to be made of all the aspects of tachtonim, but it has to serve as a dir lo. And then there's there. I mean, you could ask the same question about the shulchan. Like, why did you have to have a shulchan? And why did you have to have chalas in the shulchan? And so on and so forth. So I think.
I mean, I thank you. It's true. I hear what you're saying, but I think my question in this case, you want to show that you don't want light, that you don't need light. So the menorah is like, I hear what you're saying, and thank you. Okay, let me think about
I
it.
don't know. I mean, Derek, I have no idea. That's what comes to me. Like,
It was, yeah.
who needed any of it in the physical way?
No, but wait, but for Dira P'tachtenim, we have to light it. Aaron represented Bnei Yisrael. The way it comes to this world is through Am Yisrael, through Bnei Yisrael. We have to light it. We have to donate. We have to build. We have to light our own house. We have to light Shabbos candles. It's us. The Eibishter, sure, he can do everything. He didn't have to build a world. The whole purpose is us. We light the world. That's what's so remarkable. We light the world. And that light goes and spreads everywhere.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther.
So both of them together. Other thing, just remembering when I did, I taught for so many years in different schools about, and I dafka taught about, I had the kids like, bend their hands or put their hands up straight in victory, like the menorah. So interesting how a shluchim, we, if the Rebbe said something, that became like, that was the center of my message. You know what I'm saying? Like looking back now, like some kids remember me for that. Literally, they say, oh, you remember you taught us? Like I taught maybe a few times a year in the school. They didn't let me in, but they remembered the menorah. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's probably because of the brilliant way in which you conveyed it, like that you made their body like in the shape. In other words, that's why they remember.
But I'm just saying, like, why did I dafka take that piece? Because this is what the Rebbe said. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think we're all amazing.
Somebody wrote, I don't know from who, but thank you. She wrote Galgal, wheel, whirl, whirlwind, whirling, rolling over and over. Something that goes over and over, pour into a cup in order to pour out again. Thank you for that link. I don't know the part. I mean, obviously this was very interesting on so many different levels. But the part that really captured my attention was the wideness of the top of the cup. That has to be that his rachvos in giving out. It has to be like everything that we have. No holding back, no limitations.
Something that really got my attention, maybe because I've been thinking about this, and like it was reinforced with what happened with the hostages last night, the two who were free. I was thinking, I heard at the Kinnis from a Shapiro, I was talking to her actually, and she said how after October 7th, she had this feeling like everyone has to do what they can do, and she can't give money, and she's not going and volunteering, but what can she do? Maybe she can inspire people to do more mitzvahs. And she actually did an amazing lecture after October 7th, which I listened to, and I would mention it to her. Anyway, it got me thinking, and I was thinking just last night, like, maybe I need to just go out of my comfort zone and like reach out to people that I otherwise would not reach out to. I was specifically thinking about mikvah. Some people who I haven't spoken to in a while and who I reached out to in the past and I didn't really like make headway with. And then when I kind of heard about how these daughters of this one of the hostages who were freed had been inspired to do mitzvahs, and this was like an ace rotten. And I was thinking, you know what? You just have to like, I need to push myself. And then this sikha where the Rebbe was saying that the cups were upside down and like going beyond yourself, going in a way that isn't just that makes sense or that isn't, but that you stretch yourself and you pour down more than what you think you should, more than maybe what you're comfortable with, because that's what we're supposed to be doing, that we're supposed to be these kinds of windows. It really just spoke to me. I felt like that's very inspiring. So thank you.
Yeah, we just have to turn ourselves upside down.
Upside down, inside out.
Exactly. But it was reminding me also of the luchos. Everybody always wrote the luchos with the rounded tops, and how, the Rebbe said, no, they have to be square, and how long it's taken, people still don't, you know, it's not worldwide that everybody
Yeah, it's like, don't confuse me with the facts, even though the Rebbe brings down, you know, exactly where it says this, but
takes
people
time.
like to
Everything
hold on.
takes-
Yeah, people like to hold on to the familiar.
and we have no time.
Yeah, and this whole
I-
idea of
I-
doing more than normal, more than usual. B'chlal, it's obviously so, and I see that in by the shluchim. It's like what you were saying about the treats for your kids, Rivky. Like, I mean, I could so relate, and it's
Thank
like,
you,
you know,
Rob.
like,
You're
no,
validating.
totally. I also remember a story of my brother going back to Tzfas once. This is like literally in the early years, and you're allowed to. They would want to take toilet paper because, you know, Israel, the toilet paper. Let's not. Okay, this is not being recorded, but everything. And my brother was strict, like, you know, we can't. There's only allowed this amount of weight. And then somebody came with a huge package, literally a suitcase, for somebody who lives in Tzfas. And it was like, just no question. And it's like, yeah, sure. I was a little girl, and I've seen it, Baruch Hashem, in my own house afterwards, but that made such an impression on me that for another person, and to do obviously so, just that doesn't make sense. You know, it's l'chatchila riber. And yeah, I'm proud to say for us, it's like, it's just normal, I think. I mean, including everybody, because I think everybody has this. Like, we learned this from the Rebbe, and it's like just like so normal that what we do for somebody else, it's beyond. Definitely don't do it for ourselves.
I had
Yeah.
a quick question about the menorah on the Arch of Titus, about if they were round, right? So I think I saw a little bit in the Sikha where the Rebbe says that it was like from the menorahs that Shlomo had formed, but I couldn't understand why would Shlomo have formed menorahs that were different than how Moshe formed them. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No, which footnote, honey?
I closed the Sefer, but it was, I was curious about it. That's why I looked down, and the Rebbe was saying,
Oh, here it's Ha'ara 46. I didn't learn the Sa'ara, but let me see if I could understand anything.
because you know, where otherwise did the round menorahs come from that they were drawing in the Arch of Titus? It came from something. So they say that it came from one of the 10 that it looks like from the 10 menorahs that Shlomo made, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if you want to know why but those weren't how it was in the Baisheni. So I'm just trying to understand, why was it? It seems like it's saying that it wasn't how Moshe's were, but why not? I couldn't understand that.
No, I think the Rebbe is saying the opposite. Nira loimer shemenayah shleimu nasu kitzuras menayas Moshe.
Yeah, but if you keep reading, it sounds like then the Rebbe says, no, the Rebbe asks questions on that.
Honey,
No, the opposite's funny.
I think we also have to remember that the way they lit was through menorahs. There were a lot of menorahs. The whole Beis HaMikdash had to be lit. The menorah of the Kodesh, I mean, they needed light.
So
the
was
homes needed
Shlomo
light. The
HaMelech-
homes needed light. You couldn't make it exactly like it was in the Beis HaMikdash. You weren't allowed to. So maybe then maybe in the Matei Midrashim they had menorahs that looked different. I mean,
It could be that
everybody
Shlomo
lit.
Dafka made it differently. It could be that
What?
Shlomo Dafka made it differently. He Dafka made it differently, so people shouldn't think it's the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash.
That could be too. But they all
But
needed
if you're looking in the
menorahs.
Ara, if you're looking in the Ara,
Even now, when we're doing Hanukkah menorahs, we're doing 8. We're not doing 7 because we don't want to say it's the Beis Hamikdash's menorah. So the fact that we're doing it in alachson, how do you say, diagonal, you know, we don't have to do that because we're not really copying the Beis Hamikdash's menorah. Like, we have to remember that when we're doing Hanukkah menorahs, we're not trying to copy the Beis Hamikdash's menorah. I mean, we're not allowed to. That's why we have 8 branches on it. And when Shlomo's doing his menorah, he wasn't trying to make it like the Beis Hamikdash, like what Esther was saying.
in footnote 46, if I'm reading it correctly, I think the Rebbe is saying the opposite. He's saying that Noisel v'zeh shekei meforish repairs Rashi al Torah Parshasenu hine gam al derech halacha mistaber l'marakin. That even according to halacha, it's plausible to say that Shlomo's menorahs were the same shape as the one of the Beis Hamikdash because Aleph lama yishana v'yichadish tzura cheres. Why should Shlomo Melech make a different shape? Beis meforish, and he brings down where's meforish shagam menorah Shlomo hayu ksherim la'avoda. So the opposite of what you're saying, Elisheva, with our menorahs now, yes, we want to underscore that they're not ksherim la'avoda, but the Rebbe is bringing down many sources that his were, and therefore he therefore the Rebbe is opining that this is not based on Shlomo's menorahs. Ubecholef, and the Rebbe says, but even if you want to say gam im timti loimer, the menorah Shlomo loy hayu ketzuras menorahs Moshe. Let's say if you want to say that lamba litzayer ata hamenorah betzuras menorah Shlomo the loy menorahs Moshe the l'chula alma hu ha'ikar. So it seems that the Rebbe's opinion is
Wait, could you explain that last line? I don't understand what that means.
which one?
V'lama nitzayir.
Lama nitzayer. So why should we today draw it
Yeah.
now? The menorah, the way that let's say if you want to say that Shlomo had other menorahs, ancillary menorahs for other purposes, why should we draw it like Shlomo's menorahs, the like menorahs Moshe? The l'chul alma hu ha'ikar. Like on one hand, yes, like Elisheva pointed out, we're not allowed to replicate, but and that's why it's 8 and it's not 7. But on the other hand, the Rebbe is saying we want to draw attention to the way it should resemble the way Moshe's menorah was, and not Shlomo, even if Shlomo had in different shapes, which the Rebbe does not seem convinced that that is the case.
So
I
does
don't know
it
if
seem
the
that
Rebbe
the
is
Rebbe is saying
talking-
that it's sorry?
No, I'm saying when the Rebbe is saying that people have like on their blanks of their maistes and everything, when they're doing the picture of the menorah, are they doing it? I never counted them. I don't have one in front of me either. Are they doing 7 or doing 8 branches?
I never saw 7. There's another reason for that also, because that's one of the symbols of Medinat Yisrael. So I do not think that anybody on their station.
I don't know. The Medinat Israel has an 8 one or a 7 one?
7.
7. So if it's 7, then it should definitely be on a slant because that's the Beis Hamikdash slant. But if you're doing an 8 branch, then why shouldn't it be? Then it could be rounded. It has nothing to do with the Beis Hamikdash.
The Rebbe is saying that, but the Rebbe is saying the opposite from you. He's saying that
I
if we're
don't
going
know.
to make, if we're going to make a
I don't know
minute,
if the Rebbe
why
is
lama
talking about
l'tzayer
that.
ata hamenorah b'tzuras menorah
No,
Shlomo?
but I'm saying,
Like
no,
menorahs
I'm
Moshe.
saying, I don't know if that's what the Rebbe is talking about. Again, I'm saying when I'm looking at all the blanks, is the Rebbe talking about the blanks of Stam, a kishut of a menorah, or when I'm putting a menorah as like a Hanukkah menorah is talking about or whatever menorah?
Both. The Rebbe wants it on stationary correctly. The Rebbe wants it formed correctly. The Rebbe wanted a fair eye in the whole world. How when you look at a menorah, it should be reminiscent of what the Rambam taught us was Moshe's menorah.
I'm feeling really bad because when I was after seminary, I guess I was like 19 years old, and I was in Italy, and it was Erev Tisha B'Av, and I had this in my mind that I need to go to Rome and see Shar Titus, and now I'm feeling terrible that I went there because I should have been like this makom that's mitzvah and what I think was tourist attraction, like,
Gam ani b'chalomi. I also went to see it. I also didn't realize. They should help
Sorry
us.
to, but
Well, how about those people that go to Auschwitz? Are they supposed to also not go? Is it like the same concept?
I don't know that it's the same concept.
And we're
because-
going off onto a tangent here.
No, I don't think it's the same concept because the Titus's arch was built
For
for
the
the
victory.
purpose of showing
Right.
Auschwitz.
Right.
No, it's a totally different thing.
Right, definitely. Okay,
Sorry,
Chani,
can
we're
I
in the
To
last.
show the victory, and you're here and they're not here, so go. With a thumbs up.
sorry, I just have one more question on those menorahs. So do you understand it that the Rebbe is saying that maybe the menorah on the arch is not from Shlomo, or even if it is from Shlomo, why would we not draw it according to Moshe's? Is that which
That-
one is it?
The
Or
Rebbe
both?
is saying that there are some that say that it's a replica of Shlomo's menorah. The Rebbe says, why should we believe that Shlomo built the menorahs that way? He brings down reasons for why would we even think that that's the way it was? But even if you want to say that that's the way it was, why would we seek to replicate that today and not the
Okay.
menorah of Moshe?
Okay, thank you.
Somebody's asking, does it mean that even when we're making Hanukkah menorahs, they need to be this way? I don't know if you're talking about like made out of silver that's going to be in a home, or we're talking about like in school arts and crafts. I think as long as it's not round, so if it's one of those like flat things like they make with the bottle caps or whatever, everybody knows that that's just like an arts and craft project and it's not depicting anything real. But it would seem that the Rebbe would have been happy with things that are like made out of silver or made to last, and not just little children's arts and craft project, that they should be reflective of this truth that the Rebbe wanted to return to all of us. Wishing everybody a very illuminated and simchatika week.
Thank you very much.
Kol tov.